Hi, welcome to Route 66, where we are taking a very slow drive through the 66 books of the Bible. Now, we are still in the book of Genesis, and we're only up to the third chapter of the book of Genesis. And this particular episode is a fateful choice. We're talking about Adam and Eve and the effects that happened at Adam and Eve in the garden, taking a bite of a piece of fruit that was forbidden. It is a moment where when you go back and do a deeper dive into the text, you discover that they made a choice. They did the same thing that you and I often do when we make bad choices. We blame someone else. Eve blamed the serpent for tempting her and telling her to eat the fruit. Adam blamed Eve, but then turned that blame to God and dared to say to God, the woman you gave me tempted me to eat the fruit. The implication of that was that, God, this is your fault. And at the end of the day, it wasn't God's fault. The instructions have been clear. You can eat of any tree, but don't eat of this tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, because on that day you will surely die. Now, we know, as we read the passage and you take a look and you can kind of look at them, scour over those verses, that Adam and Eve did not just drop dead. That's not the way it worked. But in that moment, everything shifted. A clock started to tick. Adam and Eve would begin living a life where their body would begin to deteriorate. They would find that they would have to work, that there would be some pain and a little bit of heartache and heartbreak. And the trajectory of their lives were going to change, and eventually they were going to die. Not because they were going to drop dead instantly because the fruit was poisonous, but because they had disobeyed God. The biblical text informs us that Adam and Eve heard the sound of God as he was walking in the garden. And very quickly, Adam and Eve hid themselves. This was the first game of hide and seek ever recorded in human history, just so you know, it's biblical trivia. Only the God had the distinct advantage because, well, after all, he's God. And with that advantage, his question is interesting because God asked the question, where are you? But God was asking a question that he already knew the answer to. See, as we discover, and we will discover many times on this journey through Route 66, God doesn't ask questions to gain knowledge because God already knows everything. But God asks questions to give someone the opportunity to come clean. And that's when the blame game starts. Now, when it's all said and done, the conversation with God reveals something that has always been one of the tendencies that we have as people. We always want someone else to blame. And yet, in the very beginning sections of the Bible, we get to Genesis 3, and we discover a God who makes us take responsibility for the choices we make and loves us in spite of the fact that sometimes we make bad choices. As devastating as this passage is, and as tough as this passage is, when you begin to understand the ripple effect that will go into place now throughout all of human history, the beauty of the passage is that we find a God who, although he had to be disappointed, heartbroken, was not surprised, and did not quit caring for and loving Adam and Eve, and God didn't quit providing and helping and being a part of their lives. Accountable? Yes. Judgment? Sure. A price to pay? No doubt. But an early snapshot of the incredible love of God who loved people then and now, and he gave them the gift of free will that allowed them to make the choices they made. You and I have free will to this day. And yet you don't have to read very far into the amazing story that we find in the Word of God to discover that from the get-go, and that must be a Hebrew word, get-go, from the get-go, People have always had trouble getting it right. Take heart. You'll mess up today. I'll mess up today. Some days we just won't get it right. But God doesn't quit loving us, no matter what. And that is great news. I look forward to joining you as we continue our adventure through the Bible, Route 66.